Now, before I get to the stunning news from Holland, the election victory of Geert Wilders, leader of a party that's actually promised to stop Muslim immigration. A contrast back here. Now, as I said last night, the Albanese government has quietly issued temporary visas to 860 Palestinians over the past 6 weeks. And the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister today offered these excuses, both deceitful.
These are not permanent visas. These are temporary visas. There are the same security checks that are in place for people, for Australians, that have been in place, this regime, for a long period of time.
Just as not everybody from Afghanistan is linked with the Taliban, not everybody who is Palestinian is a member of a terrorist organisation.
Let's fact check. First, Albanese's claim. In fact, 860 visas in 6 weeks are far too many, too quickly for any real security checks, particularly when many of these Palestinians will come from Gaza, which is led by an Islamist terrorist group that's now at war and with no Australian officials around to do any checks there. As for Penny Wong's claim, oh, well, not everyone is a member of a terrorist organisation like Hamas. Well, maybe Penny Wong, some members of them. And how many actually would be Hamas supporters? Because that's also important, given that a new poll shows that 75% of Palestinians actually do back Hamas and do back its shocking slaughter of 1,200 Israelis on October 7. I would have thought that's rather relevant, Foreign Minister. So I'm not surprised that one leading Jewish group is now leaning to a more discriminatory immigration policy here for its safety, starting with these Palestinians.
The whole worldview that young people growing up in Gaza and older people as well have developed has been that has been fed to them by Hamas. Are they compatible with Australian values and living alongside a Jewish community that they've been raised to hate?
And now to that contrast with the Netherlands. Now, I think the aggressive protests we have seen by pro-Palestinians, particularly in Europe, have caused a huge reaction in yesterday's Dutch election. Shock result that's going to rock Europe, because the winner in this historically tolerant country is Geert Wilders, the right-wing anti-immigration politician who wants Muslim immigration banned, as he did say on his visit to Australia.
People are saying enough is enough. Let us reclaim our country. Stop the mass immigration from Islamic countries.
Now, Geert Wilders' party won 35 seats. Everyone's saying victory. That is at least 10 more than the Labour Greens coalition that came second. So that's great. But it doesn't actually guarantee he'll become Prime Minister, because there are actually 150 seats in the Parliament. He'll need to cobble together a coalition, and the main parties all say they'll refuse to work with him, right? It's on the nose. But he might become Prime Minister, and the signal has been sent to all Europe, because even the Dutch now, the tolerant Dutch, have had enough of mass immigration, often from people who won't share their local culture. Joining me is Sky News presenter James McPherson of The Late Debate here on Sky at 10 p.m, and Evelyn Ray, writer and podcast host and on Sky and everything. James McPherson, the Dutch election result, how do you read it?
Well, there's two really interesting things that have happened here, Andrew. The first is that the popularity of Geert Wilders' party rose sharply after the October 7 attacks on Israel. Between October 7 and November 22, the polls had him go from 12% to 23% in popularity. And what happened during that period was mass pro-Palestinian rallies on the streets of Holland and indeed in cities around Europe. And I think Dutch people saw this and have reacted to it and said, we need to address this quickly, and so they've voted for Geert Wilders. The other thing that's interesting is CBS television published crime statistics in Holland from 2022, and they looked at the perpetrators by country of origin, and they found that Dutch people did not feature in the top 20 nations of origin when it came to perpetrators of crime in their own country. You remember in 2015 there was a massive influx of migrants into Europe, and I think Dutch people 8 years later, seeing the consequences of that, have said we need to take our nation back, and hence the election result.
Yes, I've been surprised by how my own very left-wing relatives there, who I love dearly, have changed some of their views over time as well as a result of all this. But Evelyn, you know, meanwhile here, we're letting in 860 Palestinians when there's clearly been little time for security checks, when clearly Jewish community leaders are worried, given all the hate they're already facing here. Seems to be a little bit of a contrast.
I'd like to ask the question, Andrew, why doesn't a country near them take them in? Why doesn't Israel take them in? If they aren't terrorists and they aren't allegedly a security threat, why wouldn't Israel or any other surrounding Arab nation take them in? Is it perhaps that they fear something that our own government is too politically correct to consider? I mean, let's face the reality here. Israel does not know who every member of Hamas is or who its supporters are. How much less would we know over here in Australia? And second to that, we need to remember when you import a person, you don't just import their physical self, you import their ideas, you import their ideologies. And I don't think 6 weeks is enough time to figure out all of that to any proper degree, any degree that would make Australians at least feel safe. And every second day, we're being told that there's a housing crisis here in Australia. So I'd like all the politicians who are pushing for this, Albanese, Penny Wong, I'd like them to offer up their Marrickville homes, their Canberra apartments, and all of that for all of the housing crisis that's happening. Meanwhile, we're importing 860 people in 6 weeks. It's absolutely absurd. It's crazy. And I think we're yet to see the consequences of it, unfortunately.
And of course, Egypt, right next to bordering Gaza, it says no to immigrants, Palestinian immigrants. Jordan, next to the sharing a border with the West Bank, says also no. Our government seems to have a different idea. And James, this will not be, a lot of these people will not be temporary immigrants. So let's put that to one side. The government says, it's just temporary visas. What, they're going to be sending them back if the war's still on? I'm not so sure about that.
And it's funny, when Anthony Albanese said that they're on temporary visas, the question he was asked is how can the Australian government be sure that these people are okay to come into our country? They're not a security threat. And his answer was, don't worry, they're on temporary visas, which is hardly very reassuring. The other weird answer from the government here was from Penny Wong. When she was criticised for bringing in 860 Palestinian refugees, she responded by saying, well, we've brought in 1,700 Israeli refugees, as if you're comparing apples with apples. And this is the problem with cultural relativism, where we assume that all cultures are alike and all are equally able to integrate into Australian society. We know that's not correct. We're seeing it every weekend on the streets of our cities around this country. And for the government to practice this cultural relativism as their guiding principle for our immigration program is not only insane, it's dangerous.
We face a peculiar kind of enemy, a particularly cruel and inhuman foe. They're genocidal. They're not fighting for this or that territory. They're fighting to eliminate the Jewish state in whatever boundary they say so. Their charter says if you find a bush and the Jew is hiding behind it, kill the Jew, kill all the Jews. Their goal goes beyond the destruction of Israel. They're part of an axis of terror. Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis. They say death to America. That's the great Satan. Israel is the small Satan. I hope I don't find any offense with any of you. You're a middle-sized Satan. They hate our free civilization. They want to bury it. They have an ideology that is mad. In the 21st century, after the Enlightenment, after the scientific revolution, after the advance of human rights and democracy, this is sheer madness.
Netanyahu went on to warn, in the presence of the Spanish and Belgian leaders, against drawing a moral equivalence between Israel and the Islamist societies.
I don't give it relative moralism that says, moral relativism that says, well, they have their society. They can do these horrible things to women. They can do these horrible things to human beings. That's their value system. That's not a value system. That's something that has to be fought. And one thing that we discover in the 21st century is that our assumption that we can live our civilized lives in our advanced countries, seeking peace, prosperity, and progress, and we can just sit back, and the barbarians will not come back. They come back. They come back in many places, and if we are unwilling to fight the barbarians, they will win.
The Israeli premier continued by highlighting the obligation of democracies to fight against the forces that seek to eradicate all non-Islamist civilizations.
So what is a democracy committed to the laws of war supposed to do? Do the laws of war give exemption to such criminals? And the answer is they don't. They say, do your best to target the terrorists. Do your best to minimize civilian casualties. But if we, the democracies, say that under no circumstances should we go in because civilians tragically get killed, then we lost. We lost before we begin. You lost, and you lost. Spain lost. Belgium lost, because this will spread. You will see it very soon. Because the axis of terror is not going to stop. If they can emerge victorious here, they intend to bring down the Middle East, and next they'll go to Europe. After that, they'll go elsewhere. If you think I'm exaggerated, I am not. This is where the pivot of history now is going to be decided. Israel is doing everything in its power to get the population out of harm's way. Hamas is doing everything in its power to keep the population in harm's way. And that's the fact. And Israel cannot be held to a standard that no one is being held to. We have to fight the terrorists. We're in complete compliance with international law. I think in many ways we're setting a different standard. We seek to minimize civilian casualties, and Hamas seeks to maximize them. And I would strongly urge you to make that distinction, not merely because it's right and just, but because your very societies are on the line. You're next. This is a battle for civilization. It has to be won. We will win it because we have no other choice. We don't have a future if we don't. Hamas has already said we'll do it again and again and again. So we'll have to eradicate them.